There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined by two guests today. I've got with me Toby Murdock. He is the co-founder and CEO of Kapost, and now a general manager at Upland Software, and also Zoë Randolph, content architect at Kapost. They are co-authors of the new book, Mastering One Voice, a marketing fable and field guide to content operations. Toby, Zoë, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, Logan. Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about some of the key lessons that you guys are sharing in your new book, Mastering One Voice, today. Before we jump straight into that, though, I would love for you guys to give listeners a little bit of context. Toby, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you and the team at Kapost and Upland have been up to these days.
Sure. So I started Kapost about 10 years ago, and I've served as its CEO up until last spring when we became part of Upland Software. And we're really excited about that and being part of the Upland family of software products. And at Kapost, our mission has always been to help large B2B marketing organizations around their content. And specifically what we want to do is enable them to have a consistent message across all their content assets and all the different customer touch points along the journey.
I love it. Zoë, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to on the team these days?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I am content architect, which basically means that I get to spend my days thinking about words, what we're saying and how we're saying it, which is a dream come true for me. And it's especially fun because our audience, it's marketers. So I get to talk to a bunch of people who are going through the same struggles that I am in B2B marketing and really speak to the heart of what we're all going through and how we can create amazing customer experience through content.
I love it. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit, guys, as we teed up here, your new book, Mastering One Voice, why was it that you guys wanted to write this book? And as the subtitle says, it's written in this format of fable and field guide. So tell us a little bit about, the why behind the book. And then as you guys have brought it to life, what that process has been like. Then we'll dig into some of the key lessons and the themes that you guys are seeing that marketers can learn from.
Sure. Well, given that we're focused on content for our customers, we've always had to produce a lot of content ourselves, of course. And we really pioneered the whole field and notion of content operations. And we've been writing about it for years and years and years. And we've had all sorts of ebooks and blog posts and guides that help people with conceptual frameworks. We have a whole content operations model that has 3 levels and 4 different phases. And we've always explained all these best practices conceptually. But I thought for a long time, I love to tell stories and try to explain and communicate. And I think, human beings actually most understand and communicate around actual fictional stories. And I was an English major way back when. And I'm also a huge fan of Patrick Lencioni that, maybe some of your listeners have heard of. He's quite popular. He writes a lot about business culture and how teams work together. And his books, particularly his most famous book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, starts with fables and tells the point that he's trying to get across through fictional stories, and then provides a conceptual framework. So for this book, what Zoe and I really wanted to do, we aggregated a lot of what we'd explain in terms of our various conceptual frameworks around content operations. But what we wanted to do uniquely this time around was actually tell the story, and tell the story from both the perspective of a B2B marketing organization and what's going on inside that organization, and also from the perspective of their customer and how that customer is interacting with the marketing content along the journey. And so we just took a plunge, and we made up a whole plot line and invented some characters, and off we went. And we just thought this would be the best way to really convey all of our ideas on how marketing organizations can work better and ultimately drive better results through working together in a new, more collaborative, more aligned way.
I love it. It's obviously a topic that you guys are really passionate about. Toby, Zoe, as content architect, I have to give you a chance to kind of chime in on, your thinking around choosing this style, this format to communicate your story. Here at Sweetfish, we're big fans of Donald Miller. Building a Story Brand podcast is one that's in my regular rotation. So tell us a little bit about how you guys started to build the characters and kind of tell this story. I think it's really interesting that it unpacks the story from a B2B marketer's perspective as well as, the customer's perspective, right?
Yeah, I can't lie. When Toby first, came to me and said, I've got this idea, it's going to be a fable, I thought, okay. All right, I'll hear you out. But I was not entirely convinced. And then, he gave me Patrick Lencioni's book to read, and I saw the way that it could work. And we also just kind of started talking about it. And Toby actually kicked off the writing and wrote a couple of the first chapters. And I could already see the story taking place. And the thing is, it's a really complicated thing that we're trying to explain here. Like Toby mentioned earlier, we've got charts and levels and phases. And it's easy to kind of read through that information and say, yeah, I get it. I think we're doing that, in my business. But when you're confronted with characters that look like you and sound like you and your colleagues, you start to see yourself and your business reflected in the story in a way you might not in a white paper. And so I think it really allows people to hold up a mirror to themselves and see maybe there's a little more that they didn't see the first time if they just read the information in a white paper or something like that. So it was very fun to kind of develop these characters. And a lot of them are based on, folks that we know or have worked with. We didn't just pull them out of thin air. It's really hopefully reflective of what real B2B enterprise marketers are going through and what they're experiencing. So
yeah, and for me, just to add to that a little bit is I've been working with some of the largest B2B companies in the world, GE, IBM, Salesforce, FedEx, on and on, for 10 years on this topic. And so the story was pretty easy to envision because it's really just an amalgamation of all those interactions and all those experiences that I've had with those companies for years and years. And then, it was a kind of crazy idea. I did get the ball rolling with the first few chapters. And then I was very lucky to have Zoe as a partner because she's a fantastic writer and she loves to write. And I think once she kind of realized that this was not ridiculous and a sane idea, she, I think, got really excited and ran with it and built out and wrote the bulk of the story. And so I think we were a good partnership in terms of me having some crazy ideas and her having some fantastic writing talent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fantastic when those sorts of partnerships come to be. And as a journalism major myself, hearing someone who says they just, love thinking about and using words every day, I can tell
that there's passion in what you do, Zoe. So let's talk about, what this concept is all about. That is the title of the book, Mastering One Voice. And I think, for some folks, as you said, Toby, you guys have been writing and blogging and speaking about content operations for years. It might be worthwhile to pause real quick and just define the term content operations in the way that you guys think about it, and then start to unpack this idea of mastering one voice. What's the challenge and what's the opportunity for marketers today? So I'll kick it back over to you for those.
Sure, great question. So a content operation is a set of processes inside of a marketing organization such that all the interactions with their customers along the journey have a consistent and personalized message and story. So let me step back and why is that so important and how did this all come about? So over the last 10, 15 years in B2B marketing, things have changed. Things have revolutionized in a huge way. We've gone from being just sales support to an equal partner in the revenue machine. And we've had to build out all these touch points, the video channel, the web channel, the blog channel, the email channel, the webinar channel, the social channel. It goes on and on and on. So marketing's gotten way more complex, managing all these different channels. There's still, of course, the sales and service channels that do a lot of human interaction with the customer. And then in large organizations, you have different divisions and product lines, you have different geographies. And so you see all these different dimensions of complexity, and it actually gets nuts, to be honest. It gets totally nuts in really large organizations in terms of, you have the email channel in Europe on the big data BU saying one story, and then you have the security BU in Asia in its blog channel saying a whole nother story. And CMOs are finding that the message and the story they're trying to bring to market gets fractured and splintered and fragmented, and it's all over the place. And often they find this in really ugly ways when they survey their customers and they say, what do you think of when you think of our brand and our message? What are we trying to tell you? And they find in these studies firsthand just how all over their place their story and their messages become. And it really makes all their efforts as a marketer as they try to bring a story to market, all their efforts are wasted in a hideous way because, you spend all this money to create content and build up these channels and, buy amplification and buy ads and enable your sales team. And many marketing leaders are finding in the wake of all this complexity we've built that they're just ending up confusing their customers because these customers are finding radically different messages and stories from all these different touch points. So a content operation is a way of first taking a big, deep breath and then saying, hey, we need to work together in how we create this customer experience. And all these different teams need to be aligned on the same strategy in terms of what the message and the story is that we're trying to bring to market, and then have a set of processes so that we can create all this content in a collaborative way so that each interaction, whether it's an email or a video or a sales meeting or a piece of services or support collateral, all is consistently telling the same story, personalized appropriately to whomever that customer is. And so that's what a content operation is all about, Logan.
Today's growth story centers around Exactly, a SaaS company that helps enterprise companies with their incentive compensation. They'd worked with search marketing agencies in the past, but they'd had issues with transparency and ROI. They wanted to improve net new leads via their organic and paid search channels, so they reached out to Directive. Optimizing search engine market share for Exactly was the top priority. Directive did this by improving search engine visibility for target audiences at the bottom of the funnel. In order to generate qualified leads, they focused on value-driven content on relevant, winnable terms, landing page testing on PPC platforms, and a laser focus on third-party directory optimization, specifically Capterra. Directive grew sales accepted lead volume by 100%. increased Capterra conversion volume by 336%, and boosted pre-qualified clicks to Capterra by 39%. If you're looking for results like this with your search engine marketing, there's a good chance Directive can help. Visit directiveconsulting.com and get a free customized proposal.
Man, I love it. And I love even more your passion on this subject that comes through, Toby, because, as you describe it, like we all need to take a deep breath because we've created all of this complexity around us. I imagine that, you see some of these same complexities and same challenges, no matter the size of the marketing team, where content gets created in a silo or something is happening over here that other folks over in a different business unit or a different region, didn't even know that was happening. Would you say that's true?
I would always just laugh because, we serve all kinds of B2B companies, financial services companies, chemical and food manufacturing companies, industrial companies, technology companies, energy companies, all kinds, all different shapes and sizes. We don't really do small businesses, but we do high growth, mid-sized companies. We do the biggest of the big companies. We do companies all over the world. And it always, when a salesperson will come back and tell me how a meeting went, or I'll go and see someone, and the story is the same everywhere. And the story is the same everywhere of, about this kind of Frankenstein-like monster of complexity they've created and the impact that is having on their customers and their experience. And so, again, the story that Zoe and I decided to tell was really just a distillation of what, I had particularly heard over and over again from all of these marketing organizations. And as different as they all are, and as different as all their businesses are, ultimately the story, it was uncanny how consistent it was for every business. And funny enough, as Zoe and I have shared the draft of our book with different people, they laugh and they say, "Oh, that's me," and everyone sees themselves in this fable that we put together, just because the experience in the story is so consistent across all these businesses.
Oh man! Again, just your experience in talking to all these marketers just comes through, Toby. So we've put forth a lot of the realities, the challenges that everyone is facing. What are some of the things that you guys recommend in the book, and as you're talking to your customers that are in B2B marketing? What are some of your recommendations on what sales and marketing leaders can do to, as you call, master one voice and deal with this complex set of circumstances in their content operations that have built up or been built up around them?
First, I wanted to say, you can see, I may have done a lot of the writing, but you can see how nice it is to have a brain like Toby's behind these kinds of efforts, because you can take all this and just put it right on the page and it really comes through. But yeah, I think that one of our big messages in the book and what we see so often is simply that it really starts by taking a look inside and getting your house in order. And people are really, really eager for external solutions. How can we automate our content so that it gets where it needs to be faster? How can we package it in a more exciting way? How can we deliver it in a more quote unquote personalized way? And what we find really is that the first thing people need to do is really, it's not sexy, but they need to sit down and talk to one another. And you hear this from our professional services folks all the time, that they'll come into an organization and what they find is when they get the folks they need in a room, they find that they're introducing themselves to one another because they haven't gotten together before, they haven't spoken together before. And the first step is that people get together and agree, what are we trying to achieve? And how are we going to achieve it together? What are we trying to say? And how does that message filter through all of our BUs and our product lines and our geographies? But if you don't have the first answer, you're never going to get to all of those other answers. So really, conversation, I think, is the first step, getting aligned.
Absolutely. I love it, Zoe. What are you guys seeing as far as teams? As you mentioned, Zoe, it's an internal struggle that needs to happen. It's not so much how you're getting the content out there to market. It's, as Toby was saying earlier, take a deep breath and getting on the same page internally. Who are you seeing that are successfully kind of championing this charge of mastering one voice internally and getting everyone aligned, getting everyone on the same page, getting everyone to stop and say, hold on, we're telling disjointed stories. We need to pause for a second, because that pause is going to, not keep going fast in the wrong direction, but is going to help us, right the ship or whatever the case might be. How are you guys seeing teams start to make that shift? Who inside the organizations have been successfully kind of championing this cause, in your opinion?
It's a whole range of people. We've seen it, a leader of demand gen, a leader of product marketing. There's getting to be more and more content, people that are content marketing leaders, a VP of content, who sometimes take the mantle. So it can be, a functional leader, but typically, and they might get it going on a small team in a division, but really, for it to succeed, it's got to get to the marketing leader of that division, or the head of marketing overall. So, to give you some examples, IBM has really prioritized content, and they have an executive, George Hammer, who leads all the content efforts across all of IBM. So, we didn't begin working with him. There were some kind of small efforts bubbling up across the organization, but his leadership really crystallized the effort so that they really could take their marketing efforts to another level. At Salesforce, funny enough, we started working with a woman named Jessica Bergman, who was leading content at a Boston-based startup called Demandware, and really did a great job of unifying all their content and telling a consistent story at Demandware. Demandware, then you might recall, got bought by Salesforce, and she became part of that team. And then the CMO of Salesforce, Stephanie Buscemi, said, hey, you know what? We really could take it to another level in terms of how we produce our content and the consistency of our message and all of our touch points. And she made it one of her very top priorities. And then she was like, how can I do this? Who knows how to do this? And she found Jessica, who had been brought into Salesforce through the acquisition. And now Jessica is really the key person, working under this top priority for Stephanie, the CMO of Salesforce, to bring what they call a unified content strategy across all of Salesforce, all of its regions, all of its clouds and business units. So to answer your question, Logan, usually there's some champion who's sort of a mid-level leader who's leading the charge, and then they ultimately partner with that top-level marketing executive. And in fact, in Zoe and I's fable, that's just what happens. But we don't want to spill all the details, but people can see how that happens in that fable. But again, it reflects the experience and what we've seen with our customers.
Yeah. As you have marketing leaders, as you mentioned, a few folks that are championing the cause right now in different organizations, Toby, Zoe, whoever kind of wants to take this one, I think identifying the problem, as you mentioned, sharing the draft of the book, you kind of got these smiles and nods and yes, that's what's happening. And I think identifying the problem is a first step. It's maybe a little bit easier than realizing where do we go from here. And so getting internal alignment being one step, then taking the problem to leadership, I imagine the next step is then getting leadership's buy-in into an action plan and the next step. So for folks who identify the problem, want to start that conversation of internal alignment on what is the story that we're telling, what are some of the ways that you advise them to start the conversation, get some early wins, and get more of the team on board?
Well, I think that a lot of the times what really helps people is getting those other departments really on board and clamoring for answers. So we've seen a lot of folks get success by talking with sales, actually, and getting sales on board, understanding that if marketing is more aligned and they have better content and then sales has access to that content, how many hours these salespeople could be saving in searching for the content that they don't have, or how many better and bigger deals they can be making by having the right content for the right context to be able to use it and deliver it. So a lot of times building that pressure is often helps from outside of marketing, actually, and really connecting it to revenue in a real way.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's, connecting it all to revenue, and no one has the sway around revenue and the criticality of projects like the sales leadership. So I think Zoe brings a great point. I think another great step is, okay, obviously this is a problem. We're hearing from our customers that we're confusing them with all these inconsistent interactions. To your point, Logan, where do we start? What do we do? And so, you start, we feel, with an assessment, and you have to break this problem down into its component parts. And, we've created models and frameworks, and we actually have an online kind of automated assessment that's totally free. And we have other assessments you do, but you can start to break down and say, okay, there's a planning stage, there's a production stage, there's a distribution stage, there's an analytics stage. There's also levels, are we working at kind of the execution level, the collaboration level, the governance level. We have this 3x4 model and 12 different jobs to be done that align at the intersection of those 3 and 4 dimensions. And through that assessment, you can start to get your arms around the problem and understand, okay, where are we stronger, and where are there some real holes that are, low hanging fruit that if we address immediately, we can get some big gains. And so that's what we really typically recommend to our customers as where they should start and where they should go. As they say, okay, I have this problem. Now, how should I take those next steps? That assessment typically helps. And I think the book, so too, we lay out that framework and give people a notion of what that framework's about, and how they could think about it in regards to their own organization.
Agreed. And I think also a good point there is that it's really about prioritizing which of those pieces you want to tackle first, and knowing that you can't do it all at once, and that you probably shouldn't also have everyone on board at once. It's important to kind of find the group of folks, a cross section of people, or, you might pick a few different teams within marketing and sales enablement that you want to do a pilot program with, and really focus on getting it right at a smaller scale and then expanding out. If you try to get everyone on board right away, you're going to experience those growing pains on a much larger scale. So getting that core group of folks who is willing and ready to make an effort to do something different. And then once you start seeing those wins, you're going to have to be barricading the doors to keep people out.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it reminds me of what we've heard on this show from a lot of our past guests, Zoe and Toby, about their shift to account-based marketing and starting with some sort of pilot, starting with some key allies on the sales team to begin testing the waters with ABM and those sorts of things before you try and go far and wide and go deep with a small group. And it sounds like, that same recommendation, that same piece of advice is echoed here for you guys for marketing teams trying to get their content operations in order. Well, I love the passion that you guys have brought to this. And I love this model for the book that you guys have followed here at Sweetfish. We're big fans of lots of the content out from Patrick Lencioni. So seeing another kind of in that vein is really interesting to me. We went through 5 dysfunctions of a team last year in our regular monthly book club here at Sweetfish. So for folks like me that are excited now that this book is out and want to see, okay, maybe I can identify with kind of the mess of content operations and then figure out what is the field guide that I can follow. What are some of the frameworks I can follow to get out of that mess? What's the best way for them to go further? The book is out now. Where can they find it? How can they stay connected with you guys? Toby, I'll kick it over to you first as we round it out today, man.
I appreciate it, but I'm going to defer to Zoe, who I think can answer this question better than I can.
Yes, the book is available at contentoperations.com. You can then, from there, there's a direct link to the Amazon link. And if you use, for listeners who are listening today, using the discount code GROWTH will give you a 30% off there for your purchase. And if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn at Zoë Randolph.
I appreciate it, Zoe. All right, contentoperations.com. That promo code is GROWTH for 30% off the book. Toby, how about you? Is LinkedIn the best way to get in touch with you as well?
Yeah, I'm Toby Murdock on LinkedIn and would love to chat with listeners on their thoughts on the book.
Awesome. Well, Toby, Zoe, this has been a great conversation. Congrats on the book launch and the tour. I hear you guys are doing some events and stuff here coming up. So much luck and safe travels and all of that. And thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. We loved it.
Hey there, this is James Carberry, founder of Sweetfish Media and one of the co-hosts of this show. For the last year and a half, I've been working on my very first book. In the book, I share the 3-part framework we've used as the foundation for our growth here at Sweetfish. Now, there are lots of companies that have raised a bunch of money and have grown insanely fast, and we've featured a lot of them here on the show. We've decided to bootstrap our business, which usually equates to pretty slow growth. But using the strategy outlined in the book, we're on pace to be one of Inc.'s fastest growing companies in 2020. The book is called Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. If you're a fan of audiobooks like me, you can find the book on Audible, or if you like physical books, you can also find it on Amazon. Just search Content-Based Networking or James Carberry, Carbary, in Audible or Amazon, and it should pop right up.